They called his office the Bermuda Triangle of executive assistants. 12 assistants in 12 months had vanished, their careers swallowed whole by the impossible standards of CEO Kian Tran. He was a titan in a tailored suit, a man whose world was built on logic, control, and coffee as black as his mood. He believed his fortress was impenetrable. What he didn't know was that across the city, a woman named Maya was trying to pay her rent with the last few dollars from her cookie jar. And she was about to apply for the one job she was completely unqualified for. This is the story of how a walking whirlwind of chaos became the one thing the king of order couldn't live without. In the kingdom of glass and steel skyscrapers, there was a king no one dared to serve. CEO Kian Tran. Every assistant fled. No one had ever survived the probation period. He was a legend, a cautionary tale whispered by the coffee machine. Until that day, a little storm named Maya appeared. Maya was 20 minutes late. And according to her logic, if you're already late, you should at least walk in with style. Unfortunately, her hair looked like it had just survived a tornado, and the coffee stain on her only white blouse looked strangely like the continent of Australia. When she pushed the glass door a bit too hard, the receptionist, who was painting her nails, flinched and ruined a perfect stroke. The receptionist looked up, her eyes as sharp as knives. Maya. The interview for executive assistant. 10 o'clock. Maya, out of breath, blurted it all out. Yes, I know it's 10:20. Yes, the subway had an issue. Yes, I went to the wrong building. And yes, I spilled coffee on my resume. But you can still read it. The receptionist just blinked, as if watching a fast-forwarded movie. Mr. Kian does not tolerate tardiness. Maya smiled. Perfect. And I don't tolerate slippery doorknobs. So, we're even. The receptionist hesitated, then pressed a button on her phone. Mr. Kian. The candidate has arrived. 5 minutes later, Maya stepped into the sanctuary. A vast office, where each chair seemed to cost more than her entire year's rent, and sitting behind a massive wooden desk was Kian Tran, a suit without a single wrinkle, perfectly styled hair, and eyes as cold as the Arctic ice. Maya took a deep breath. Don't trip, don't trip. He spoke, his voice low and even. You're late, your hair is a mess, and there is a very large stain on your shirt. Maya froze. She uselessly tried to smooth her hair. Yes, and you look like a villain from a spy movie. A very well-paid villain, but one who lacks joy. Any good movie recommendations? For the first time, Kian looked up at her fully. A long, tense silence. Your resume is crumpled. My backpack's fault. It holds a personal grudge against job interviews. Incomplete degree. Business school said I wasn't entertaining enough. No experience as an assistant. But I have a special talent for finding any lost pen. And I make excellent instant noodles. She smiled, trying to hide the panic bubbling in her stomach. Kian leaned back in his chair, looking at her as if she were an absurd math problem that somehow had an answer. Finally, he asked, why do you want this job? Because I have bills to pay. A cat that eats more than I do. And I have a special gift for getting fired as soon as I start. He raised one eyebrow. Maya winced, but kept her composure. Okay. Maybe a bit too honest. I can pretend to love corporate environments and colorful spreadsheets if that's what you want. Kian let out a soft sigh. Everyone before you was perfect on paper. Such a waste of time. Maya sat down in the chair opposite him, without waiting for an invitation. Perfection is usually boring. Another pause. Kian closed the folder. The position is temporary. A 1-month trial. If you survive, you stay. Survive? Sounds about right. From the way the receptionist looked at me, I thought I was heading into battle. Maya stood up, surprised she hadn't been kicked out yet. All right, Mr. Kian. Challenge accepted. This will be fun. Or at least, very chaotic. Start tomorrow. 8 a.m. Sharp. 7:59. Just to throw you off. As Maya left, she had no idea that she had just become the most exciting topic of discussion in the glass-walled break room. The whispers began. How long will she last? I bet a week. 3 days. Did you see his face? I say 2. If she brings him the wrong kind of tea, it'll be her last day. In his office, Kian Tran slowly twirled a pen in his hand. He was still thinking about that strange candidate. Did that girl annoy him? Or challenge him? He wasn't sure yet, but one thing he knew. Things were about to get much more interesting. Maya arrived at 7:59 the next morning, just as she had promised. Her desk was placed right outside Kian's fortress, like a frontline watchtower. A perfect position to witness the chaos, or to become its first victim. On her screen was Kian's schedule, a dense maze of meetings, without a single gap to breathe. Maya wondered if he photosynthesized to survive. At exactly 8:15, Kian emerged. He placed a folder on her desk. His voice was emotionless. This is next week's schedule. There are 3 priority 1 meetings that need to be scheduled for Wednesday. Solve it. Maya opened the folder. Wednesday was already booked solid from morning to night. It was impossible. This wasn't a task. It was an impossible test. A test designed for her to fail. She looked at the names of the 3 priority meetings. 2 of them were with 2 tech companies in fierce competition with each other. And she knew, from the financial news she read late at night, that both were trying to poach the same lead engineer from Kian. A crazy thought sparked in Maya's mind. A thought that could get her fired instantly, or turn her into a legend. 10 minutes later, she knocked on Kian's office door. I can't schedule 3 meetings on Wednesday. Kian looked up, a flicker of triumph in his eyes. I know, Maya smiled. But I can schedule 1 meeting. A single meeting. With all 3 parties. Silence filled the room. For a moment, the perfect machine inside Kian's head seemed to skip a beat. He stared at her. You mean, putting mortal enemies in the same room? That's suicide. No, it's efficiency. Maya continued, her voice full of confidence. You'll show them you're not afraid of competition. You control the game, and you'll save 6 precious hours. Kian said nothing. He just looked at her. A long look. That made the air in the room feel thick. Fine. He said, do it. But if it fails, so do you. The next morning, Maya decided to show some goodwill. She walked into the office with 2 cups of coffee. One for her, and one for the Ice King. She had added a little milk and a small spoonful of sugar to his cup. Just enough to give it the taste of the human world. I brought coffee, she announced cheerfully. Kian looked at the cup on his desk as if it contained poison. I drink my coffee black. I know, but you need a little joy in your life. Try it. He took a small sip, and his face wrinkled slightly. It's too sweet. It's just not too bitter. Maya took a sip of her own coffee. Black coffee, no sugar. Is the choice of people who are afraid that if they taste a little sweetness, they'll realize just how bland their own world is. Her words were like a stone thrown into a still pond. Kian put the cup down. Harder than necessary. My world helped me build this empire. An empire? Or a cage? Maya asked, unafraid. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like a very beautiful, gilded cage. The joint meeting on Wednesday happened. It was tense. It was unpredictable. But in the end, it was a stunning success. Kian not only kept his lead engineer, but he also signed a consulting contract with one of the rival companies. They were impressed by his boldness. That day, Kian had to leave the office early. An urgent file was on his computer, and it was password protected. Maya called him. No answer. She needed that file for a meeting in 1 hour. She sat down in his chair. The scent of his expensive cologne hung in the air. She began to type Kian Tran 123. Wrong. Kyoking. Wrong. Collins Empire. Wrong. She paused and thought about the coffee argument, about the gilded cage. He was a man of numbers, of control, of the company. The company was everything. Collins and Tran Corporation, founded in 1998. She typed, TT Corp. 1998. The screen unlocked. When Kian returned, he found the file printed and placed neatly on his desk. He walked over to Maya's desk. How did you get into my computer? I guessed the password. Maya answered, her eyes not leaving her screen. You should consider something more complex. Maybe the name of your first cat? This is a serious security breach. His voice was cold. The best security is security that doesn't get in the way of work, sir. She looked up at him, her gaze clear. And the work has been done. Kian stood there, speechless. He wanted to be angry, but he couldn't, because she was right. That evening, as Maya was about to leave, Kian stepped out of his office. They stood facing each other for a moment. He seemed to want to say something, but in the end, he just gave a single nod and walked away. On the drive home, Kian drove in silence as usual. But for the first time in years, that silence didn't feel peaceful. It felt empty. A few weeks passed. Maya was not fired. On the contrary, she became an indispensable part of the machine, a component that worked in a way no one understood, but that helped everything run smoother. Then one day, Kian announced the company's annual gala, an event that, according to the office whispers, was a social battlefield, where deals were signed and careers were decided over glasses of champagne. He told Maya, his voice as flat as a weather report, "You need to go. It's mandatory for senior staff." Maya raised an eyebrow. Senior staff? I thought I was just a high-risk employee. You are my assistant. You represent my office, Kian said. But for a moment, the narrator could hear a hint of hesitation in his mind. The thought of Maya, with her lovely chaos, being unleashed in a room full of sharks and silk suits, both terrified him and, strangely, intrigued him. On Saturday night, Maya stood before a mirror in a rented dress. A deep red dress. It wasn't just a dress. It was a statement. A statement that said, "I don't belong here, but at least I'll make you look." When she stepped into the lavish ballroom, she felt like a wildflower in a garden of meticulously pruned bonsai trees. And of course, her high heels seemed to have a mind of their own. She stumbled. A spectacular stumble that sent a whole tray of champagne glasses flying into the air, like a piece of performance art. All of it, heading straight for Kian Tran. Time seemed to slow down. Kian turned with astonishingly fast reflexes, dodging nearly all of it. Only a few drops landed on his polished shoes. The entire room fell silent. Maya's face turned redder than her dress. She was preparing for a cold rage, for an on-the-spot dismissal. But Kian didn't do that. He walked over, ignoring the broken glass. He looked at her, a gaze devoid of anger. "Are you okay?" That question surprised Maya more than the fall itself. I'm fine." He offered her his arm. "Come on. We need some air." They stood on the balcony, away from the curious stares. He leaned against the railing, silent. Maya felt she had to say something. "You play the piano." Kian turned to look at her, surprise evident. "How did you know?" "Just now, when the pianist was playing that Chopin piece," she said. "Your fingers were gliding lightly over the railing. You weren't just listening. You were playing along." The defense in Kian's eyes crumbled for a moment. He looked down at his hands, as if they had just betrayed a deep secret. "I used to, when I was a kid." "Why did you stop?" "My mother said it was a waste of time." His voice grew quiet. She said, "Empire builders don't have time for dreamy hobbies." It was the first time in a decade he had admitted that to another person. Maya looked up at the night sky. Do you see that star? The Seven Sisters. Kian followed her gaze. Pleiades. A star cluster in the Taurus constellation. Maya smiled. You know the scientific fact. I know the myth. About 7 sisters who were chased by a hunter and turned into stars to escape. Kian was silent, but he was truly listening. This girl. She didn't just see numbers and facts. She saw stories, melodies, things he had left behind long ago. The following Monday morning, the phone rang. It was Kian's mother, Margaret Tran. He put it on speaker out of habit. A powerful woman's voice boomed. Kian, darling, I've arranged lunch for you on Friday. At the plaza. You, me, and Caroline? Caroline? Caroline DeWitt, Judge DeWitt's daughter, Harvard Law graduate. Perfect family. I think it's time you settled down. Kian closed his eyes. It felt like a noose was tightening. Mom, I'm busy on Friday but why? Do you have a date with someone? Her voice was challenging. Kian looked at Maya, who was sitting opposite him, pretending to sort papers but clearly listening intently. A desperate panic rose in him. And he said the craziest thing? Yes. I'm seeing someone. Silence on the other end of the line. Seeing someone? Who? What's her name? Her name is... The name left his lips before his brain could issue a veto. It was a reflex named Maya. Her name is Maya. Maya looked up sharply, her eyes wide. His mother's voice rang out. Then bring Maya to lunch. I'm dying to meet the girl who has captured my son's heart. 1 o'clock, Friday. Don't be late. The call ended. Kian looked at Maya, with the expression of a man who had just accidentally detonated a bomb. You just used me as a human shield against your mother, Maya said, her voice full of disbelief. I panicked. Please, help me just this once. One lunch. Pretend to be my girlfriend. Then she'll leave me alone. I'll give you a raise. 20%, Maya said flatly. You have to listen to my playlist in your car for a month deal. Kian sighed in relief. The lunch at the plaza was as tense as an international negotiation. Margaret Tran was a formidable woman. She looked Maya up and down, her gaze as sharp as a scanner. But Maya, instead of trying to be elegant, was herself. She spilled her water, she laughed a little too loudly, and when Margaret asked the fatal question, So, my dear, what do you see in my son? A man many find difficult? Maya looked her straight in the eye. I see a man whose fingers trace the notes of Chopin when he thinks no one is looking. And I think that man is worth getting to know. That answer changed everything. It was genuine. It was profound. It showed she wasn't looking at Kian's bank account. She was looking at his soul. When they left, Margaret pulled her son aside. She whispered, That girl, son, she doesn't look at your empire. She looks at you. For God's sake, don't mess this up. Kian and Maya walked in silence on the streets of New York. The play was over, but they both knew something very real had been accidentally brought to life. Part 4. After that fateful lunch, the air between Kian and Maya changed. It was no longer the confrontation of two different planets, but the silent gravitational pull of two stars being drawn together. But the universe always has a way of testing new attractions. This time, the test was named Zenith Tech, their biggest technology client. They were on the verge of losing the contract. The reason? Kian's marketing department had completely lost touch with the younger generation. Kian sat in the boardroom, his face like stone, as his team presented the new campaign. Slides full of empty jargon. Stock photos of young people in suits, smiling fakely. It was like a grandfather's speech, trying to explain the internet. Robert Sterling, the CEO of Zenith Tech, didn't hide his disappointment. You have 1 week, he said, bring me something real. Or, we're done. The office was thrown into a panic. Kian locked himself in his office, his silence more frightening than any roar. Maya saw it all. She saw the desperation in the eyes of the veteran marketers. She saw the pressure crushing Kian's shoulders. That night, she stayed late. She found the failed Zenith proposal. She read it, and then she laughed. A laugh of understanding. They didn't get it. They were trying to sell a product to a generation they no longer belonged to. The next day, Robert Sterling came to the office to collect his documents, ready to terminate the contract. As he stepped out of the elevator, Maya was there waiting. "Mr. Sterling, may I have 2 minutes?" Kian saw it from his office. His heart stopped. What the hell is she doing? Maya didn't use slides. She didn't use charts. She pulled out her phone. "This," she said, "is your audience." She showed him a meme of a dog sitting in a burning room, with the caption, "This is fine. Their lives are organized chaos. They don't need an app that promises perfection. They need a tool to help them survive the chaos." She showed him a viral video, a short, funny clip. "Our campaign won't be an advertisement. It will be part of the conversation. It will be memes, short videos, real stories. It will say, 'Hey, we know your life is on fire. At least, your to-do list is fine.'" Robert Sterling stood motionless. Then, he laughed. A hearty laugh. "Young lady, what's your name?" "Maya, sir." "You just saved your boss's contract." Kian stood behind the glass wall, witnessing it all. It was a strange feeling, a mixture of utter terror and indescribable pride. This girl had walked into the lion's den and tamed it with just a phone and a bit of insight. Maya was given full charge of the Zenith campaign. And the whispers in the office began to change. They were no longer curious. They were tinged with envy. "She has some kind of magic with the boss. That magic is probably practiced after hours." Kian and Maya threw themselves into the work. They stayed in the office until late at night. The stress and pressure became the catalyst that pulled them even closer. One night, it was almost midnight, Maya noticed Kian looked very different. He was pale. He kept rubbing his forehead. Work was the perfect excuse. But the narrator could see. He wasn't just exhausted from work. He was exhausted from fighting the very feelings that were rising within him. And then, he collapsed. Right at his desk. Maya rushed in. She touched his forehead. It was burning hot. The panic in her quickly gave way to a fierce protectiveness. She helped him. A man who always stood firm as a statue. To the break room. She laid him down on the sofa. She found medicine in the first aid kit, and borrowed a bag of chamomile tea from the accountant. When he groggily woke up, she was sitting beside him, placing a cool cloth on his forehead. He looked at her. His eyes no longer cold and controlling. Only tired and vulnerable. "You don't have to do this." "Of course, I do," Maya said softly. "Because obviously, you would never do it for yourself." The high fever and exhaustion had broken down all of Kian's defenses. He began to speak, his voice a whisper. "When I was a kid, whenever I got sick, my mother would call the nanny. She said she didn't have time for weakness. I learned that being sick meant being alone, that needing someone was a burden." He looked at her, his eyes deep. "The ones who bring warmth, they are always the first to leave, because they realize how cold this house is. And you will leave too." Maya's heart ached. She took his hand. His hand was burning. "Then let me stay," she said, her voice firm. "Let me prove to you that warmth isn't for leaving. Warmth is for warming up the whole house." In that moment, the world seemed to stop. He raised his hand and gently touched her cheek. Their lips were only centimeters apart. He could feel her breath, but then, he pulled back. The fear in his eyes was greater than his desire. It was the most terrifying moment of his life. Not the fear of kissing her, but the fear of what came after. the fear of needing her tomorrow. And the day after that, on Monday morning, an emergency board meeting was called. Maya was summoned. The room was full of solemn faces. They sat there like judges. Richard Hayes, the chairman of the board, spoke. "Ms. Evans, there have been concerns about your rapid advancement." Another added, "Many believe your relationship with the CEO has crossed professional boundaries." They brought up the lunch with his mother. They brought up her being assigned the Zenith project. They turned her success into a weapon against her. Maya looked at Kian, pleading for help with her eyes. But Kian was fighting his own war. He thought of his mother's warning. He thought of his responsibility to the company. He chose a safe answer, a CEO's answer. Miss Evans' promotion was based entirely on her excellent performance and results. He thought that answer would protect her. But he was wrong. She didn't need him to protect her job. She needed him to protect her. To Maya, his silence was worse than an accusation. The intimacy of the night before now felt like a cruel joke. She stood up, the hurt in her eyes turning to fire. "I see." She looked straight at Kian. "I was wrong to think you were different. In the end, you're still what I saw on the first day. A cold machine. A gilded cage." And then, she turned to the board. "I resign. Effective immediately." She turned and walked out of the room, slamming the door behind her, leaving Kian frozen amidst the silence of accusations and the ruins of something he was only just beginning to realize he couldn't live without. The door slammed shut, but its echo lingered. The next day, Maya's desk was empty, but it was perfectly, painfully neat. Every file was labeled. Every pen was aligned. She had left, but she had still finished her work. It was a silent farewell. And it was sharper than any accusation. Kian Tran sat in his office. His empire was still running. Emails were still being sent. Calls were still being made. But the soul was gone. The office was now just like he used to be. Efficient, cold, and incredibly empty. He tried to work, but his mind kept drifting to that empty desk. He heard her laughter in the silence. He felt her presence in her absence. He realized her chaos was the very order he had always been missing. By the third day, he couldn't take it anymore. He called human resources. "Find me a replacement. Someone experienced, smart, who isn't afraid of pressure." The HR director asked, "Do you have any specific personality requirements, sir?" Kian was silent, because he realized he was describing Maya. He didn't need someone with her skills. He needed her. The truth hit him like a physical blow. A truth he had tried to bury under layers of suits and profit margins. He hadn't just lost an excellent employee. He had pushed away the only person who made him feel human. He was in love with her, and he had let his own fear betray that love. He picked up the phone, called her. Voicemail. He called again. Still voicemail. He drove to her apartment address. The neighbor said she had moved out 2 days ago. Kian stood on the streets of New York. For the first time in his life, the man who controlled everything felt completely helpless. He had built an empire, but he couldn't find one girl. Salvation came from the most unexpected place. David, the young lawyer from the company. He approached Kian hesitantly. "Sir, I'm not sure if I should say this, but I saw Maya post a story on social media. She's volunteering at an animal shelter in the suburbs. She said she needed puppy therapy after being hurt by corporate sharks." Kian had never used social media, but within 10 minutes, he had an account and had found the address. On Sunday morning, he drove out of the city. On the passenger seat was a bouquet of pink peonies, the flower he had once overheard her say she loved. In his head was a speech he had rehearsed 100 times. The shelter was a chaotic, noisy place that smelled of hay, the complete opposite of his world. He stepped out of his luxury car, his suit looking ridiculously out of place. I'm looking for Maya Evans, he told a volunteer. Oh, Maya. She's in the piglet area. Straight ahead and to the right. You can't miss it. The piglet area? The speech in his head began to unravel. And then he saw her. Maya was sitting in a pile of straw, wearing old jeans and rubber boots. In her arms was a tiny pink piglet. She was talking to it like a baby. No, Butter. You can't chew on my bracelet. Kian stood there, the bouquet in his hand like a foreign object. Maya, he called out. She looked up, the smile on her face froze, and turned to ice. What are you doing here? He stepped into the pen, trying to keep his balance on the damp ground. He held out the bouquet. I came to. To what? Maya stood up, putting the piglet down. To explain why you sat there silently, while they tore my reputation to shreds? I was wrong, Kian said, but the words sounded weak. I was scared. Yes, you were. Maya looked him straight in the eye. You're always scared. You're scared of coffee with sugar. You're scared of dreamy hobbies. And you're terrified of standing up for someone, when it might stain your perfect suit. Kian took a step forward. And that's when disaster struck. His foot slipped on a patch of mud hidden under the straw. He fell. An ungraceful fall. Backward. Right into a pile of straw mixed with mud. The bouquet flew from his hands. Pink peony petals scattering around him. The piglet, Butter, curiously trotted over to him. It started sniffing. And then nibbling on his silk tie, which was worth several $100s. For a moment, Maya tried to hold back her laughter. But she failed. She laughed. A loud, hearty laugh. And it broke the tension. Kian sat there, in the straw. His hair a mess, his suit ruined, and a piglet trying to eat his tie. This was not part of my plan, he muttered. Maya walked closer. Butter, leave the man's tie alone. She looked down at Kian, the most powerful man she had ever known, now looking utterly pathetic. And in that pathetic state, she saw something more real than ever before. He stood up, trying to brush off the mud. Maya, I'm not here to explain, he said, his voice no longer hesitant. I'm here to apologize, not as a CEO, but as a coward who was too afraid to admit that he needs you, that he loves you. The piglet Butter was still tugging at his tie. Kian ignored it. He got down on one knee, right on the dirty ground. I know I don't deserve it, but give me one more chance. Not to come back to the company, but to come back to me. Give me a chance to be the man you saw. The man whose fingers traced the notes of Chopin. Maya looked at him kneeling, in his filthy state, with a piglet destroying his outfit. She saw the desperation, and the sincerity in his eyes. She sighed, then smiled faintly. All right, she said, but on one condition. Anything. Next time. She said. If anyone dares to question my competence, you don't just have to speak up. You have to roar. Deal? Kian said, without a second of hesitation. Well then. Maya said. Get up, and go take a shower. You smell like a barn. Kian looked down at himself. Then he laughed. A real laugh. For the first time in years. He didn't feel like he was in a gilded cage. He was in a pig pen. And he felt freer than ever. The following Monday, Maya returned. When she walked through the glass doors, the whispers were no longer tinged with envy. They were tinged with awe. The storm had returned, but Kian knew an apology in the mud wasn't enough. His promise needed to be backed by action. He called an all-company meeting. Everyone was there, including the board members who had accused her. Kian stood before them, not as a CEO making an announcement, but as a king defending his kingdom. He didn't say much. He just announced one thing. From today, Maya Evans will hold a new position, Director of Creativity and Innovation. He paused, his eyes scanning the room. The entire success of the Zenith campaign was hers. The future of this company depends on ideas like hers. Anyone who questions her competence is questioning my judgment. It wasn't an introduction. It was a declaration. He hadn't just spoken up. He had roared. And Maya, for the first time, felt a wall inside her begin to melt. The chance to test their new partnership came sooner than they expected. It was called the Leviathan Investment Group, a financial giant with a $70 million investment fund. They were looking for a partner, a company with a disruptive vision. It was the biggest opportunity in the company's history. For the next few days, Kian's office became a war room. But this time, there were two generals. They worked late into the night. They argued. They challenged each other. It was a difficult dance. One step forward in strategy, two steps back in unresolved tension between them. The narrator could hear both of their thoughts. She was still wary, looking for signs of the old, cold Kian. He was learning to let go of control, learning to trust her creative chaos. The peak of the tension came one Wednesday night. They stood before a financial chart in the conference room. The city of New York glittered outside the window. Kian shook his head. This is too risky, Maya. The numbers don't support such a radical visual. Maya turned to face him, her eyes on fire. Kian, Leviathan doesn't invest in safe numbers. They invest in the future. We have to show them that future. You think I don't know that? But one mistake could cost us everything. And a moment of hesitation could leave us with nothing. They stood very close, the frustration and passion for their work mingling, until it was indistinguishable. The energy between them could have sparked a flame. You are so. Kian started. And you are too. Maya shot back. He cut her off, not with a word, but with a kiss. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was a surrender, an admission that his logic had lost to the storm named Maya. It was the culmination of weeks of suppression, of admiration, of anger, and of something much, much deeper. Maya was stunned for a second. Then she kissed him back, just as fiercely. When they pulled apart, they were both breathless. The air in the room was now even thicker than before. He started. We should, she said. They went back to work, but no one was really focused anymore. Everything had changed, permanently. The day of the presentation arrived. 1 hour before the meeting, Kian's phone rang. It was his mother. Her voice was frantic. She had fallen at home. She thought she had broken her leg. Kian froze. His mind was in conflict. His mother needed him, but in that moment, he felt he needed to be here, with Maya, even more. He looked at Maya. She was pale with anxiety about the presentation. He had to go, but before he left, he placed his hands on her shoulders. He looked straight into her eyes. You've got this, Maya. I trust you. Those were the words she had needed to hear. For so long, Kian rushed to the hospital, only to find out his mother had just sprained her ankle. She had exaggerated. He realized. This was another one of her tests. He drove back to the office like a madman. He expected to find a disaster. He snuck to the conference room door and peeked through the crack. He didn't see a disaster. He saw a spectacular performance. Maya was standing there alone, but she commanded the entire room. Her voice was passionate. Her eyes were confident. She wasn't just presenting numbers. She was telling a story. And the giants of Leviathan were listening as if mesmerized. Kian leaned against the wall, a powerful wave of emotion washing over him. He didn't see a former assistant. He saw a leader, a partner, and he knew, whether this deal succeeded or not, he had already won the biggest prize. When the meeting ended, the executives from Leviathan stood up and applauded. They didn't just agree. They wanted to double the investment. Kian was waiting for her in the hallway. When she came out, their eyes met. All the professional success seemed to fade in comparison to this personal moment. Amazing, was all he could say. She smiled. We did it. No. He said, then lifted her off her feet and spun her around. You did it. When he set her down, they were still standing very close. They had conquered the giant Leviathan, but the most difficult negotiation still lay ahead. The negotiation of two hearts had only just begun. After the Leviathan victory, Kian knew the most important negotiation was still ahead. Not in the boardroom, but in his own heart. On Friday night, he invited Maya to his apartment. He was clear. Tonight, no talk of work, no charts, no strategies. Just you and me. A date. A real date. When she arrived, she almost didn't recognize him. No power suit. Just a simple shirt and jeans. He looked normal and incredibly nervous. In his usually minimalist, cold apartment, there were now flickering candles, and a delicious aroma wafted from the kitchen. He had cooked. The man who ran an empire had spent the afternoon learning how to pan-sear salmon from YouTube, because he knew genuine gestures were worth more than any five-star restaurant. Dinner began in an awkward silence. The man who could face the most ruthless investors without blinking was now clumsy with a plate of salmon. Maya smiled. She reached her hand across the table. Ball okay. Let's start over. I'm Maya. I like piglets, crazy ideas, and coffee that tastes like dessert. Kian took her hand. His own was warm and strong. I'm Kian. I like Chopin. I hate parties, and apparently, I have a fatal weakness for women who can turn my whole world upside down. The awkwardness melted away. They talked, really talked, about lost dreams, about secret fears. After dinner, they sat on the sofa. The silence returned. But this time, it was filled with anticipation. What do you want from me, Kian? Maya asked directly. What is this? What are we? Kian looked at her, and for the first time, he completely removed his mask. I want your chaos in my kitchen, he said, his voice low and sincere. I want your crazy ideas in my meetings. I want the way you see right through me, even when I can't see myself. I fell in love with you, Maya. Not because you're perfect, but because you taught me that imperfection is what's worth living for. With tears in her eyes, Maya confessed, I fell in love with you too, but I'm afraid of your walls, Kian. They were built for so long. I'm afraid that one day, when things get hard, you'll build them again. And this time, I'll be on the inside. Kian moved closer. He lifted her chin. There are no more walls. You tore them all down. Now, there's just a house. And I want you to be the one who warms it. They kissed. A kiss that was no longer a surprise or a surrender. It was a promise. A beginning. 1 year passed. Under the leadership of Kian and Maya, Collins and Tran Corp didn't just grow. It changed. It became bold, creative, and full of life. They were a power couple in the business world. But more importantly, they were a happy couple. At the CEO of the Year award ceremony, Kian was once again on the stage of honor. He began his speech with the usual numbers and strategies. Maya sat in the front row, smiling. But then, he stopped. He went off script. All of these achievements would be meaningless, he said, his eyes searching for Maya in the crowd, if it weren't for one person who walked into my life and taught me that the biggest deal isn't about money. It's about finding a partner, someone who can challenge you, change you, and love you for who you are. The entire auditorium went silent. Maya Evans. He called her name, and he did something the entire business world could not have predicted. He got down on one knee, right on the stage, but his suit was tailored too perfectly, too tight. As he bent his knee, a loud re-5p was heard, loud enough for the microphone to pick it up. His pants had torn. He lost his balance for a moment, looking more like someone attempting a difficult yoga pose. The audience went from stunned silence to stifled laughter. Maya couldn't hold it in anymore. She walked onto the stage, laughing through her tears. Kian Tran, the man who can run $1 billion empire, but can't kneel without an incident. She said into the microphone. He looked up at her, his face bright red, but his eyes sparkling with joy. So, what's your answer? Yes, she said loudly. I accept. 1,000 times yes. 2 months later, their wedding took place in a small garden. It wasn't perfect. It was chaotic. The groom forgot the rings in the car. The bride tripped on her own dress. And Butter, the rescue pig, trotted across the lawn right as they shared their first kiss as husband and wife. It was a beautiful mess. It was them. As they drove away, to the cheers of their friends, Kian took her hand. Thank you for walking into my life and breaking all my perfect plans. Maya leaned over and kissed his cheek. That was just the beginning, my love. Buckle up, because sometimes, the biggest deal of a lifetime isn't signed with ink. It starts with a stumble, a bit of chaos, and the courage to love someone who can turn your whole world upside down.